My father sabotaged my marriage and betrayed my trust in the most heart-wrenching way. It felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath me, leaving me gasping for breath in a sea of confusion and despair. But I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I refused to be a victim of his choices. While he thought he could tear apart my life with his selfishness, I was determined to reclaim my happiness and find my voice again. This is how I faced the shocking truth and fought to rebuild my life amidst the chaos. I had poured my heart into my marriage with Jason, believing in our love and dreams for the future. When I discovered the secrets lurking in the shadows, my world shattered. But instead of crumbling, I chose to rise up from the ashes. Before I share my story, let me know in the comments how you relate to my journey. Your support means the world to me. And if you resonate with my truth, consider subscribing to join me on this path of healing. Now let's dive into the heart of my story. My name is Clara, and I am 35 years old. I often think about my life and my marriage to Jason. I believed we had a perfect life together. We shared dreams and made plans for our future. But now I feel unsure. My father, Robert, has always been my rock. He is strong and wise. He raised me to be confident and independent. I have always looked up to him. He taught me the value of trust and love. He has supported me through every step of my life. I often turn to him for advice. He knows me well and understands my heart. Recently, though, I have noticed something strange. My father's influence over my decisions seems to grow. I find myself seeking his opinion more and more. I wonder if this is healthy. I love my father, but I also love my husband. I worry that I might be losing my own voice. I remember the day Jason and I got married. It was a sunny day. We said our vows with smiles on our faces. I felt so happy. My father stood proudly beside me. He told us to always support each other. Jason and I promised to build a life filled with love and laughter. In our early years, we had fun together. We traveled, shared meals, and built memories. Jason made me laugh. We danced in our living room and dreamed about having a family. My father cheered us on. He was happy to see us in love. But lately I feel a change in Jason. He seems distant. He works late and often misses our plans. I try to talk to him, but he brushes me off. I feel alone. I confide in my father. I tell him I feel something is wrong. Robert listens but downplays my concerns. He tells me that every couple goes through rough patches. I want to believe him. I want to trust that everything will be okay. Still, I feel a knot in my stomach. I start to doubt myself. I see Jason laughing with my father more often. They seem to have a bond that I do not understand. It makes me uneasy. I did not think they would become so close. At first, I find comfort in their friendship. Feels good to see them getting along. But soon I feel left out. One afternoon, I overhear them talking in the living room. I walk by and catch bits of their conversation. They are laughing and sharing secrets. I feel a strange twist in my heart. I cannot shake the feeling that something is off. I want to ignore it. I want to believe everything is fine. But doubts linger. I watch Jason closely. He seems distracted, lost in thought. He has become less attentive to me. I miss the connection we once shared. The more I think about it, the more I feel alone. I try to reach out to my friends, but they seem busy with their own lives. I do not want to burden them with my worries. I feel trapped in my own mind. I start to question my marriage. What if I am imagining things? What if I am overreacting? I wish I could talk to Jason about my feelings, but it feels impossible. The fear of conflict holds me back. Days turn into weeks. The distance between Jason and me grows. I feel like I am watching my life from a distance. I feel like I am losing my husband. I want to fix it, but I do not know how. One evening I sit with my father. He notices my sadness. I open up to him again. I tell him about my worries. I mention how Jason seems different. Robert smiles gently and reassures me. He tells me that marriages have ups and downs. He encourages me to trust Jason. I want to trust Jason. But I also want to trust my instincts. Something is not right. I feel a storm brewing inside me. My father's comforting words do little to calm my fears. I need to find a way to address this. As I sit with my father, I notice the way he looks at me. There is a flicker of something in his eyes. I cannot place it. I push the thought away, but it lingers. I tell myself that I am just being paranoid. The next day, I decide to confront Jason. I wait until evening. We sit on the couch together. I take a deep breath and share my feelings. I tell him I feel like we are drifting apart. I ask if he has something to tell me. Jason looks surprised. He shakes his head and tells me I am overreacting. He says he is just busy with work. I want to believe him. I want to feel safe in my marriage. But his reaction feels dismissive. I feel the knot in my stomach tighten. I want to press further, but I hesitate. I remember my father's words. I do not want to overreact. Yet the doubt grows. I find myself questioning everything. I wonder if I am losing sight of what is real. I want to trust my husband and my father. But my instincts tell me something is wrong. I try to push the feeling away. I want to enjoy my life. I want to be happy. But the worry stays with me. I feel like I am standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of what is below. As I reflect on my life, I realize that I have to stay strong. I must find a way to regain my voice. I need to understand what is truly happening in my life. I brace myself for the journey ahead. I know it will not be easy. But I must face the truth. I must seek clarity. In the back of my mind, I hear my father's voice. I wonder if he really knows what is happening. I hope I can trust him. I hope I am wrong about everything. But deep down, I feel something is about to change forever. In the beginning, Jason and I had a beautiful love story. We met in college. He was charming and funny. I felt drawn to him from the first moment. We quickly became inseparable. We shared dreams and laughter. Our relationship felt like a fairy tale. After we graduated, we decided to get married. The day of our wedding was magical. I wore a white dress and walked down the aisle. Jason stood waiting for me with a big smile. My father walked me down, proud and supportive. I felt joy fill my heart. As we built our life together, we made plans for the future. We talked about having children. We dreamed of a house filled with laughter. We wanted adventures and memories. Jason was my partner, my best friend. I thought we could conquer anything together. During the early years of our marriage, we shared many wonderful moments. We traveled to new places and explored different cultures. We went on long hikes and enjoyed quiet evenings at home. We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries with love. Each memory felt like a treasure. My father, Robert, was always there to cheer us on. He believed in our love. He often said that our marriage was built on a strong foundation. He admired Jason and thought of him as a son. Robert was a guiding light in our lives, offering advice and support. As time passed, I noticed a shift in our dynamic. Jason began to work longer hours. He spent more time away from home. I tried to be understanding, but it felt like a wall was building between us. I missed our late-night talks and shared laughter. Despite my worries, I convinced myself it was just a phase. I wanted to believe that everything was still okay. I focused on being supportive, hoping it would bring us closer. I cooked his favorite meals and planned special date nights. I wanted to remind him of the love we shared. But the more I tried, the more distant he seemed. I noticed he spent time with my father, Robert. They would go out for drinks or spend weekends together. At first, I was happy they formed a bond. I thought it was good for Jason to have someone to talk to. But as time went on, I began to feel uneasy. I wondered what they talked about. I felt like an outsider in my own life. I tried to push the feelings aside, but they lingered. I wanted to trust both my father and my husband. One evening, I came home to find them laughing in the living room. I felt a pang of jealousy. I wanted to join in, but I hesitated. I watched from the doorway as they shared jokes and stories. It felt like a moment meant only for them. I wanted to believe everything was fine. I wanted to feel secure in my marriage. But every time I saw them together, a seed of doubt grew in my heart. I questioned whether I was still a priority in Jason's life. Weeks turned into months. The joy I once felt began to fade. I felt like I was losing my best friend. I tried to reach out to Jason, but he always seemed distracted. I wanted to ask him about their friendship, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I turned to my father. I sought comfort in his wisdom. I told him about my concerns, hoping he would reassure me. But Robert brushed it off. He told me that Jason was just busy with work. He reminded me that every marriage has ups and downs. I wanted to trust my father's view, but the doubts grew heavier. I felt torn between my love for Jason and my loyalty to my father. I wanted to believe them both. But I also wanted to protect myself from pain. One day, I decided to invite them both for dinner. I hoped it would bring us closer. I wanted to create a space for open communication. I cooked a delicious meal and set the table with care. I wanted this night to be special. As we sat down to eat, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Jason and Robert laughed and shared stories. I tried to join in, but I felt like an observer. The conversation flowed easily, but I felt a wall between us. After dinner, I took a deep breath and decided to voice my feelings. I told them how I had been feeling distant. I mentioned my fears about our relationship. Jason looked surprised. He smiled and told me I was overthinking things. My father nodded, agreeing with Jason. They reassured me that everything was okay. But their words felt hollow. I wanted to believe them, but doubt clouded my mind. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I felt a heavy weight in my chest. I loved Jason and my father, but I also felt lost. I wanted to trust them both, but I feared I was missing something important. The next day, I tried to shake off the sadness. I went for a long walk to clear my mind. As I walked, I recalled all the happy moments we had shared. I wanted to hold on to those memories, but the doubts kept creeping in. I thought about how my father had always encouraged me. He taught me to be strong and independent. I wanted to honor that strength, but I felt weak in this situation. I was struggling to find my footing. As I returned home, I felt a flicker of determination. I knew I needed to focus on my own feelings. I wanted to understand my heart. I had to find clarity in this confusion. I decided to reach out to an old friend. I hoped she could offer a fresh perspective. I needed someone to help me see things clearly. I longed for support and understanding. The journey ahead felt uncertain. I knew I had to face my fears. I wanted to reclaim my voice. I wanted to protect my marriage and my relationship with my father. I took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. I felt a small spark of hope. I knew I could find my way. I spent the next few weeks trying to regain my sense of normalcy. I reached out to my friend, Mia. She was someone I had known for years. I felt comfortable sharing my worries with her. I wanted to hear her thoughts on my situation with Jason and my father. Mia listened carefully as I spoke. I told her about my feelings of unease. I explained how Jason seemed distant and how my father brushed off my concerns. I needed someone to validate my feelings. I hoped she would help me find clarity. Mia nodded. She understood my struggle. She told me that it was important to trust my instincts. She encouraged me to pay attention to the changes in Jason's behavior. I felt a spark of hope. I realized that I was not alone in this journey. After our talk, I felt a little stronger. I began to notice the small things. I watched how Jason interacted with my father. I paid attention to their conversations. I noticed how they shared jokes and secrets. There was a bond between them that felt too close for comfort. One evening, I found myself sitting at the dining table. Jason came home late, as usual. I tried to be cheerful, but I felt a weight in my chest. I wanted to ask him about his day. I wanted to connect, but the words felt stuck. As we sat together, I noticed Jason's phone buzzing on the table. He quickly grabbed it and moved it out of sight. I felt a rush of anxiety. Why was he hiding his phone? I wanted to ask him, but fear held me back. I didn't want to create more distance between us. Days passed, and I continued to feel isolated. I tried to engage with Jason, but he seemed preoccupied. He would often stare off into space, lost in thought. I felt like I had to compete for his attention. I wanted to bring back the joy we once shared. One weekend, I decided to invite Mia over for dinner. I hoped that having a friend around would lighten the mood. I wanted Jason to see that I was trying. I cooked a nice meal and set the table with care. When Mia arrived, she brought a warmth to the room. We laughed and shared stories. I felt a small spark of happiness. I watched Jason interact with Mia, and he seemed more engaged. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that our dynamic could shift. But as the night went on, I noticed Jason slipping back into his distant self. He would occasionally check his phone, leaving me feeling invisible. I tried to ignore the hurt, but it was hard. I wanted to feel connected to him again. After Mia left, I sat with Jason. I decided to bring up my feelings again. I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. I told him how much I missed our connection. I explained how his distance made me feel lonely. Jason looked surprised. He said I was being too sensitive. He told me that work had been stressful, and he didn't mean to push me away. I wanted to believe him, but I still felt a knot in my stomach. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I wanted to trust Jason, but the doubts were growing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I decided to take a walk to clear my mind. I needed space to think. As I walked through the neighborhood, I felt the sun on my face. It brought me a small sense of peace. I tried to focus on the beauty around me, but my mind kept drifting back to Jason and my father. I thought about their friendship and how it had changed. I felt a sense of loss for the closeness we once shared. I wanted to understand why things had shifted. As I walked, I passed by a small park. I decided to sit on a bench and reflect. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I thought about my father's influence on my life. He had always been my protector. But now I felt a different kind of fear. I wondered if my father was aware of the distance between Jason and me. Did he see how unhappy I was? I wanted to reach out to him, but I feared his reaction. I worried he might dismiss my feelings again. After some time in the park, I felt a spark of determination. I realized I needed to confront the truth. I had to find a way to address my feelings with both Jason and my father. I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. That evening, I sat down with Jason after dinner. I wanted to talk to him about my worries again. I felt nervous but knew it was necessary. I asked him if we could have an honest conversation. Jason looked at me and I could see the confusion in his eyes. I explained how I felt like I was losing him. I mentioned the changes I had noticed in him and his bond with my father. I wanted him to understand how much it hurt. As I spoke, I felt tears welling up. I didn't want to cry, but the emotions poured out. Jason listened, but I could see him growing defensive. He insisted that I was misunderstanding everything. He said my fears were unfounded. I felt crushed. I wanted him to hear me, but he seemed unwilling to listen. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. I reminded myself that I needed to stay strong. I couldn't let my fears consume me. After our conversation, I felt a mix of frustration and sadness. I wanted to connect with Jason, but it felt like we were worlds apart. I decided to reach out to my father again. I hoped he could provide clarity. The next day, I called my father and asked if we could meet. I needed to talk to him about my concerns. He agreed and suggested we meet for coffee. I felt nervous but knew this conversation was essential. As I sat across from my father, I took a deep breath. I shared my feelings about Jason and the distance I felt in our relationship. I wanted my father to understand how serious this was for me. Robert listened intently. He nodded but didn't offer much insight. He said that relationships take work. He reminded me that love requires patience. I wanted to agree, but I felt like he wasn't truly hearing me. After our conversation, I left feeling frustrated. I wanted my father to see the depth of my pain. I wished he could understand how lost I felt. I realized that I had to rely on my own strength to find clarity. I returned home, determined to figure things out. I knew I had to confront my feelings head-on. I wanted to understand the truth, even if it hurt. I was ready to face whatever came next. Days turned into weeks and I still felt a growing tension in my life. I was determined to find the truth about Jason and my father. I knew I needed to understand the nature of their relationship. I felt it was crucial for my peace of mind. One evening I was at home, sitting on the couch, lost in thought. Jason was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. I could hear him humming softly. I wanted to feel that warmth again, but my heart felt heavy. Doubts clouded my mind. As I sat there, I remembered a time when Jason and I had a deep connection. We would spend hours talking about our dreams and fears. Those moments felt like magic. I longed for that closeness again. While I waited for dinner, I decided to check my phone. I felt the need to distract myself from the tension. I opened my social media app and scrolled through posts. Then I saw something that made my heart race. It was a picture of Jason and my father together. They were at a bar, laughing and smiling. I felt a knot in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. After dinner, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. I felt a mix of fear and anger. I knew I had to confront Jason about what I had seen. I decided to wait until after dinner, hoping the right moment would come. As we finished our meal, I took a deep breath. I gathered my courage and asked Jason about the picture. I told him I had seen it online and wanted to know what was happening. He looked caught off guard. He hesitated for a moment before responding. He said it was just a casual night with my father. He insisted that there was nothing more to it. I wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered in my mind. I pressed him further. I asked if he felt like he was spending too much time with my father. I wanted him to understand my concerns. But Jason became defensive. He said I was overreacting again. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream, but I held back. I didn't want to create more distance between us. I wanted to connect, but every attempt seemed to push us further apart. That night, I lay in bed, feeling lost. I stared at the ceiling and tears rolled down my cheeks. I felt trapped in a web of confusion and pain. I didn't know how to break free from it. The next day, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I wandered through the park, hoping to find some peace. I watched families playing and couples walking hand in hand. I felt a pang of jealousy. I longed for that happiness. As I walked, I reflected on my relationship with Jason. I thought about the changes I had noticed. I also remembered how close my father and Jason had become. It made me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I needed answers. It was time to dig deeper. I decided to follow Jason one evening. I hoped to see for myself what was happening. That night, I waited until Jason left for his usual outing with my father. I felt nervous, but I was determined. I quietly followed them, keeping my distance. My heart raced as I drove behind them. They arrived at a bar not far from our home. I parked my car and watched as they entered. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I sat in my car, feeling like a detective. I wanted to uncover the truth. After a few minutes, I saw them sitting at a table together. They were laughing and sharing drinks. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I wanted to believe it was just a friendly outing, but my heart told me otherwise. As the night went on, I noticed how comfortable they were with each other. They shared secrets and inside jokes. I felt like an outsider, watching from the shadows. I wanted to burst in and demand answers, but fear held me back. Then I saw something that shocked me. Jason leaned in closer to my father, whispering something. They both laughed, and my heart dropped. I felt a sickening feeling in my stomach. I couldn't breathe. I sat there frozen. My mind raced with questions. What were they talking about? Was there something more happening between them? I felt my heart shatter. I wanted to believe it was innocent, but doubt crept in like a thief in the night. After a while, I decided I had seen enough. I felt like I was going to explode with emotions. I drove home in a daze, replaying the scene in my mind. I wanted to cry, but I held it in. I didn't want to show weakness. When I got home, I felt a mix of anger and despair. I couldn't believe what I had witnessed. I wanted to confront Jason and my father, but I felt scared. I didn't know how to approach them. That night, I lay in bed, feeling lost. My heart was heavy with betrayal. I felt like my world was crumbling. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The next day, I decided I had to confront Jason. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I needed answers, even if it hurt. I wanted to understand what was happening between him and my father. When Jason came home, I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew I had to be strong. I took a deep breath and sat him down. I told him I needed to talk, that it was important. As I spoke, I felt my voice trembling. I asked him about the night at the bar. I told him I had seen them together and that it made me uncomfortable. I wanted him to be honest. Jason looked at me, surprise in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but I interrupted. I told him I felt like I was losing him and needed to know the truth. I deserved honesty. He hesitated and then finally admitted that he and my father had formed a strong friendship. But he insisted there was nothing inappropriate. He told me I was misunderstanding their bond. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. I wanted to believe him, but doubts still lingered. I knew I had to confront my father too. I had to hear his side of the story. I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. I knew I needed answers. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I was determined to find clarity in this storm of confusion. The days after my confrontation with Jason were filled with confusion. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. I wanted to trust him, but my heart was heavy with doubt. I needed to confront my father. I had to hear his side of the story. One evening, I called my father and asked if we could meet. I felt nervous, but I knew it was important. I needed to understand what was happening between him and Jason. He agreed to meet at our favorite cafe. As I sat at the cafe, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I wanted to be strong, but I was afraid of what my father might say. I wanted to believe he would understand my concerns. I hoped he would be honest with me. When Robert arrived, he smiled warmly. He greeted me with a hug, and for a brief moment, I felt comforted. I wanted to forget my worries, but I knew I couldn't. I needed to address the elephant in the room. We sat down and ordered coffee. I took a deep breath and decided to bring up my concerns. I told him about the changes I had noticed in Jason and how close he had become with my father. I explained how it made me feel uneasy. Robert listened quietly. He nodded, but I could see a hint of defensiveness in his eyes. I pressed on, asking if there was anything I should know. I wanted him to be open with me. I needed to know if I was missing something. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. He told me that Jason was a good man and that their friendship was just that, friendship. He insisted that there was nothing inappropriate going on between them. But his words felt rehearsed. I felt frustration bubbling inside me. I wanted to scream, to shake him, and make him see my pain. I told him that I didn't want to believe there was something wrong, but my instincts were screaming at me. Robert looked at me with concern. He said I was overthinking things. He reminded me that relationships evolve and change. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I pushed harder, asking if he had noticed how Jason had been acting. I wanted him to understand that I was struggling. I needed him to see how serious this was for me. But Robert kept insisting that I was imagining things. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I wanted to feel supported, but I felt alone. I told him that I felt like I was losing both him and Jason. I needed my father to understand the depth of my pain. Robert reached out and squeezed my hand. He told me he loved me and wanted the best for me. But his words felt empty. I wanted to trust him, but I felt like he was not seeing the whole picture. After our conversation, I left the cafe feeling defeated. I wanted to break down and cry, but I held it in. I walked to my car, feeling like I was carrying a heavy burden. I didn't know how to fix this. That night, I sat at home, replaying the conversation in my mind. I felt like I was caught in a web of confusion and frustration. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent, feeling lost. The next day, I decided to take action. I needed to gather evidence. I wanted to uncover the truth about Jason and my father. I felt like a detective on a mission. I knew I needed to be careful. I didn't want to invade their privacy, but I felt desperate. I decided to check Jason's phone while he was in the shower. I hoped to find something that would help me understand what was happening. As I searched his phone, my heart raced. I felt guilty for invading his privacy, but I needed answers. I opened his messages and scanned through them. I felt a mix of fear and hope. I wanted to find something that would explain everything. After scrolling through his conversations, I found nothing suspicious. But then I stumbled upon a message from my father. My heart dropped. Jason had sent my father a message saying, "Thanks for being there for me." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. What did that mean? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I wanted to confront them both, but I didn't know how. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. When Jason came out of the shower, I quickly put his phone back where I found it. I felt a rush of panic. I wanted to ask him about the message, but I feared his reaction. I didn't want to push him away further. That evening, I decided to call Mia again. I needed someone to talk to. I wanted to share my discoveries and seek her advice. When she answered, I felt a sense of relief. I poured my heart out to her. I told her about the message and how it made me feel. I explained how I was struggling to trust both Jason and my father. I needed her perspective. Mia listened patiently. She told me that it was important to trust my instincts. She encouraged me to confront Jason about my feelings. She said I deserved honesty and clarity. I felt a flicker of determination. After our conversation, I felt a little stronger. I knew I had to confront Jason again. I couldn't let this continue. I needed answers, even if it hurt. That night, I sat down with Jason after dinner. I took a deep breath and told him I needed to talk again. I explained that I had found a message between him and my father. I wanted to know what it meant. At first, he looked surprised. He asked me if I had gone through his phone. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I admitted that I had, and I could see his expression change. He sighed and told me that I was being invasive. He insisted that there was nothing inappropriate between him and my father. But I pressed him, asking why he needed to thank him for being there. Jason's expression shifted. He looked frustrated. He said that my paranoia was ruining our relationship. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream, but I stayed calm. I told him I needed him to understand my feelings. I wanted to trust him, but the doubts clouded my mind. I needed him to be honest with me. The tension in the room grew thick. I could see the anger in his eyes. He told me I was making a mountain out of a molehill. I felt crushed. I wanted to break down and cry, but I held it in. After our conversation, I felt more lost than ever. I wanted to believe Jason, but the doubts kept creeping in. I felt like I was caught in a storm and I didn't know how to find my way out. I knew I had to keep searching for the truth. I needed to find clarity, even if it meant facing painful realities. I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The days following my last confrontation with Jason were filled with confusion and frustration. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I needed to confront my father again. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to dig deeper into what was happening between him and Jason. One afternoon, I decided to visit my father at his house. I felt nervous but knew I had to do this. I needed to find clarity and answers. I wanted to understand if he was aware of the growing tension in my marriage. When I arrived, Robert greeted me with a warm smile. It made me feel a little better, but I knew I had to bring up the hard conversation. We sat in the living room and I felt the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me. I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told him how I felt lost and confused. I explained that my marriage was in trouble and that I needed his support. I wanted him to understand the seriousness of the situation. Robert listened but didn't seem to grasp the depth of my pain. He told me that every marriage goes through tough times. I wanted to scream that this was different. I felt like I was losing both him and Jason, but I held back my emotions. I decided to be direct. I asked him if he had noticed how close he had become with Jason. I wanted to know if he understood how it made me feel. I needed him to see my perspective. He nodded, but I could see a hint of defensiveness in his eyes. He insisted that their friendship was innocent and that I was misinterpreting their bond. I felt my heart sink again. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the unease in my gut. I pressed further, asking if he had ever discussed anything personal with Jason. I wanted to know if they shared secrets or feelings that should have been kept private. I needed to know if my father was crossing a line. Robert looked taken aback by my question. He assured me that their conversations were nothing more than friendly chats. He said I needed to trust him and Jason. But I felt like I was fighting an uphill battle. My frustration grew as I realized my father wasn't going to give me the answers I needed. I felt trapped in my own fears. I wanted to scream to make him understand how serious this was for me. But all I could do was sit there feeling defeated. After our conversation, I left feeling lost and alone. I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't let this continue without knowing the truth. I decided to gather more evidence. That night, I sat at home, thinking about what to do next. I felt like I was living in a fog. I needed to find clarity, but I didn't know where to look. I thought about Jason and my father, their friendship, and how it made me feel. The next day, I decided to reach out to Mia again. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me process everything. I called her and asked if we could meet for coffee. I wanted her perspective on my situation. When we met, I poured my heart out to her. I told her about my father's dismissive attitude and how I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I needed her to help me see things clearly. Mia listened intently. She told me that I deserved to feel safe and secure in my relationships. She reminded me that I had every right to trust my instincts. I felt a sense of relief in her words. After our talk, I felt a little stronger. I decided I had to confront Jason one more time. I needed to lay everything out on the table. I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. That evening, I sat down with Jason after dinner. I took a deep breath and told him I needed to talk. I explained that I felt like I was in a whirlwind of confusion. I needed him to be completely honest with me. I asked him if he had ever shared anything personal with my father. I wanted to know if there were secrets between them that I should know about. I needed to understand the depth of their friendship. At first, Jason looked surprised. He told me I was being paranoid again. But I pressed on, asking if he truly understood how his actions were affecting me. I told him that I felt betrayed and confused. As I spoke, I could see the frustration building in his eyes. He told me that I was making things worse by not trusting him. I felt crushed. I wanted to reach out and shake him to make him see my pain. But instead of lashing out, I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. I told him that I needed him to understand the seriousness of my feelings. I wanted him to see that I was struggling. In that moment, I could see his expression change. He looked at me with a mix of frustration and confusion. He finally admitted that he and my father had shared personal stories, but nothing inappropriate. My heart raced as I absorbed his words. I wanted to believe him, but doubt still lingered. I told him that I needed more than just his word. I needed to see that he understood how his actions affected me. The tension in the room felt thick. I could see the anger in his eyes as he tried to explain himself. He told me that I was pushing him away, and that I needed to trust him. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I wanted to scream and cry, but I held back. I told him I just wanted to feel secure in our relationship. I needed to know that I was still a priority in his life. As our conversation continued, I felt the walls closing in around me. I could see the frustration in his eyes, and I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. I didn't want to lose him, but I also couldn't ignore my instincts. That night, I lay in bed feeling defeated. I wanted to believe in my marriage, but doubt loomed over me like a dark cloud. I knew I had to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I realized I had to take control of my life. I needed to confront my father one last time. I could not let this situation destroy my marriage or my relationship with him. I had to seek the truth even if it hurt. I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. It was time to face the reality of my situation. The days dragged on, and I felt the weight of despair heavy on my shoulders. I knew I had to confront my father again. I needed to break through the wall of denial that seemed to stand between us. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle, but I couldn't give up. I decided to invite my father over to my house for dinner. I thought it might create a relaxed atmosphere for our conversation. I wanted to find a moment to talk without distractions. I hoped we could connect on a deeper level. When he arrived, I greeted him with a smile, but inside I felt a storm brewing. I set the table and prepared a simple meal. I wanted everything to feel warm and inviting, but my heart felt heavy. As we sat down to eat, I tried to keep the conversation light. We talked about the weather and family, but I could feel the tension building. I knew I had to bring up the hard topic soon. After we finished eating, I took a deep breath and decided it was time. I looked him in the eyes and told him that I needed to talk about Jason and their friendship. I told him how I felt confused and hurt by their closeness. Robert's expression shifted. He looked taken aback for a moment, but then he quickly composed himself. He told me again that I was overreacting. He insisted that their friendship was innocent and that I should trust him. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I wanted to scream that I was not overreacting. I told him that I felt like I was losing both him and Jason. I needed him to understand how serious this was for me. Robert sighed and leaned back in his chair. He told me that he had always been there for me, and that I needed to trust him to know what was best. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream that I didn't feel safe. I pressed on, asking if he had ever shared anything personal with Jason. I wanted to know if there was anything he was hiding from me. I needed to hear it from him. He hesitated for a moment, and I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He finally admitted that they had shared stories, but he insisted there was nothing inappropriate. My heart raced. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered. I told him that I felt like I was losing control of my life. I wanted to feel secure in my relationships, and the lack of transparency was tearing me apart. I needed him to see how serious this was for me. Robert looked at me with concern. He told me that he loved me and wanted the best for me. But I felt like his words were empty. I wanted him to understand the depth of my pain. As our conversation continued, I felt the walls closing in around me. I could see the frustration building in his eyes. He told me that I needed to trust him and Jason, that their friendship was just that, friendship. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I wanted to scream, but I held it in. I told him that I needed more than just his word. I needed to see that he understood how his actions affected me. The tension in the room felt thick. I could feel my heart racing as I fought to keep my emotions in check. I told him that I loved him, but I couldn't ignore my instincts. I needed him to be honest with me. After what felt like an eternity, Robert finally agreed to talk to Jason about their friendship. He promised to have an open conversation. I felt a flicker of hope, but I wasn't sure if it would lead to the answers I needed. As he left my house that night, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I knew I had taken a step forward, but I also felt the weight of uncertainty. I wanted to believe that everything would be okay, but doubt still lingered in my mind. The next day, I decided to reach out to Jason again. I wanted to see how he was feeling after our previous conversation. I needed to know if he understood the seriousness of the situation. When he came home that evening, I could see the tension in his body. I felt a rush of anxiety. I asked him how he felt about our last conversation, but he seemed hesitant to open up. I pressed him again, asking if he had thought more about what I said. I wanted to know if he understood how his actions were affecting me. He sighed and told me he felt trapped. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I told him that I wasn't trying to trap him. I wanted to connect and understand. I needed him to be open with me. As we talked, I could see the tension building in his eyes. He told me that he was tired of feeling like he was being questioned. He insisted that he loved me and would never hurt me. I wanted to believe him, but the doubts were still there. I told him that I needed to feel secure in our relationship. I needed to know that he was committed to us. As our conversation continued, I felt the walls closing in on me again. I knew I had to find a way to break through the tension. I needed to find a solution, but I felt lost. That night, I lay in bed unable to sleep. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I wanted to believe that everything would work out, but the doubts lingered like a shadow. I realized I needed to take control of my life. I knew I had to confront both Jason and Robert together. I had to bring everything out into the open. I needed them to see how their actions were affecting me. I couldn't let this continue any longer. With a deep breath, I decided to plan a family dinner. I wanted to create a space where we could all talk openly. I hoped it would help us find a way to resolve our issues. As I prepared for the dinner, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew this was the only way to uncover the truth. I wanted to reclaim my life and my relationships. I was ready to face whatever came next. It was time to confront the reality of my situation once and for all. The day of the family dinner arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I spent the morning preparing the meal, hoping to create a warm and inviting atmosphere. I wanted to set the stage for an open and honest conversation with Jason and my father. I cooked a hearty pasta dish, tossed a fresh salad, and baked garlic bread. As I worked, I tried to push away the doubts swirling in my mind. I reminded myself that this was my chance to finally address everything that had been troubling me. As the clock ticked closer to dinner time, I set the table with care. I wanted everything to feel special. I lit a few candles and arranged the flowers my neighbor had given me. I hoped that the warmth of the setting would help ease the tension. When Jason and Robert arrived, they seemed cheerful, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I greeted them with a smile, but my heart raced with anticipation. I felt like I was preparing to face a battle. We sat down to eat, and I tried to engage in light conversation. I asked about their day and shared a few stories from mine. For a moment, it felt normal. But the weight of my concerns hung in the air, waiting to be addressed. After we finished eating, I took a deep breath. It was time to confront the issues that had been tearing at me. I looked at Jason and then at my father. I could see the confusion in their eyes. I started by expressing my gratitude for both of them being there. I told them how much I loved them and how important our family was to me. I wanted them to understand that this conversation came from a place of love. Then I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told them that I felt lost and confused about their friendship. I explained how their closeness made me feel uncomfortable and that it had affected my marriage. Robert looked surprised and Jason frowned. I could see the tension building as I spoke. I wanted them to understand how serious this was for me, but I also felt fear creeping in. I pressed on, asking them both if they had ever shared anything personal that should have remained private. I needed them to be honest with me. I wanted to know if there was something happening that I wasn't aware of. Jason shifted in his seat, and Robert's expression changed. I could see the frustration in their eyes, but I stood my ground. I told them that I needed to hear the truth, whatever it might be. Robert finally spoke, insisting that there was nothing inappropriate in their friendship. He said that they had shared personal stories, but it was all harmless. I felt my heart race as I listened. I wanted to believe him, but doubt still lingered. I turned to Jason, asking if he felt the same way. He nodded, but I could see the tension in his body. He told me that he cared about both my father and me and that he would never do anything to hurt me. But something inside me still felt unsettled. I needed more than just their words. I needed to feel secure in my relationships. I told them that I wanted transparency. I wanted to know that I could trust both of them. The atmosphere grew thick with tension. I could see both men struggling to understand my feelings. Robert looked at Jason and I could sense a silent conversation passing between them. I felt myself holding my breath, waiting for their response. Finally, Jason spoke up. He admitted that he had shared personal experiences with my father, but insisted that it was nothing more than a friendship. He said that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream that I wasn't overreacting. I told him that I was trying to protect our marriage and that I needed him to take my feelings seriously. The conversation escalated and I could feel the anger rising between us. I felt trapped in a cycle of frustration and I wanted to break free. I didn't want to fight, but I also couldn't stay silent. As the tension built, I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. I reminded myself of the love I had for both of them. I didn't want this to turn into a battle. I wanted understanding. I looked at Robert and said that I needed him to support me as my father. I wanted him to understand how much this affected my marriage. I felt tears welling up in my eyes as I spoke. Robert seemed taken aback but nodded slowly. He told me that he would talk to Jason about it. He promised to be more mindful of how their friendship might affect me. I felt a flicker of hope, but I knew this was just the beginning. As the evening wore on, I could feel the tension slowly start to ease. We moved on to lighter topics, but I knew that the conversation wasn't over. I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. After dinner, as we cleaned up together, I could see that both Jason and Robert were trying to understand my perspective. I felt a small sense of victory. I had spoken my truth and they had listened. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the conversation. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had taken a step toward reclaiming my voice. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I felt stronger. I realized that I had the power to shape my relationships. I needed to continue to communicate openly and honestly. I wanted to build trust and understanding with both Jason and my father. With that thought in mind, I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever came next. I knew that I would continue to fight for my happiness and my relationships, no matter the obstacles. I was determined to find clarity and connection in my life. The days after our family dinner felt different. I could sense a shift in the atmosphere. I had finally spoken my truth, and both Jason and my father seemed more aware of my feelings. I hoped this would lead to a stronger connection, but I also knew that words alone were not enough. One evening, I decided to sit down with Jason. I wanted to talk more openly about everything that had happened. I needed to know that we were both committed to rebuilding our relationship. I didn't want the tension from before to linger between us. I found him in the living room watching TV. I took a deep breath and asked if we could talk. He paused the show and turned to me, curiosity in his eyes. I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. I started by telling him how much I appreciated his willingness to listen during our last conversation. I wanted him to know that it meant a lot to me. I explained that I wanted to work together to build a stronger foundation for our relationship. Jason nodded, and I could see he was engaged. I told him that I needed to feel secure and valued in our marriage. I wanted to know that he understood my feelings, and that he was committed to supporting me. He looked thoughtful for a moment before responding. He admitted that he had not fully realized how much his friendship with my father had affected me. He told me that he was willing to make changes to ensure I felt more secure. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I told him that I appreciated his willingness to listen and adapt, but I also emphasized that it was essential for us to communicate openly moving forward. I needed to know that we could talk about our feelings without fear of judgment. As we discussed our feelings, I could see the walls between us starting to crumble. We shared our fears and insecurities, and I felt a sense of connection growing. It was as if we were finally on the same page. Then I brought up my father again. I explained that while I wanted them to have a friendship, I needed to set boundaries. I wanted to know that my marriage was the priority. Jason agreed and said he would talk to Robert about respecting those boundaries. The conversation felt like a turning point for us. I realized that we were both willing to put in the effort to make our relationship work. I felt a flicker of hope for the future. Later that week, I decided it was time to confront my father again. I wanted to ensure that he understood the boundaries I needed in our family dynamic. I hoped that he would respect my feelings and support my marriage. I called Robert and asked if we could meet for coffee. I felt nervous but knew it was necessary. When we sat down together, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told him how much I loved him and appreciated his support. But I also explained that I needed him to understand my perspective. I wanted him to know that my relationship with Jason needed to come first. Robert listened intently. He nodded, but I could see a hint of defensiveness in his eyes. I pressed on, reminding him of our previous conversations. I told him that I needed him to respect my boundaries and be mindful of how close he had become with Jason. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. He told me that he understood where I was coming from, but he also felt that I was being overly protective. I felt my heart race. I wanted him to understand that this was not just about being protective, it was about my emotional well-being. I explained that I didn't want to lose my connection with him, but I needed him to support my marriage. I wanted him to understand that my relationship with Jason was my priority, and I needed him to respect that. After a moment of silence, Robert finally agreed. He told me he would make an effort to be more aware of my feelings and respect the boundaries I needed. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but I also knew that actions spoke louder than words. As we finished our coffee, I felt a flicker of hope. I realized that open communication was key to rebuilding my relationships. I hoped that both Jason and my father would honor the boundaries we had discussed. That evening, I sat down with Jason again. I wanted to share the outcome of my conversation with Robert. I explained that my father had agreed to be more mindful of our boundaries. I felt proud of myself for standing up for what I needed. Jason smiled and told me he was proud of me too. We talked about what the future would look like now that we were both committed to making our relationship stronger. I felt a sense of unity between us. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed a change in our family dynamic. Jason and Robert seemed to be more respectful of my feelings. I felt more secure in my marriage, and I could see the effort both men were making. I continued to communicate openly with Jason, and I felt our bond grow stronger. We explored new ways to connect, and I felt like we were finally on the right track. I knew that honesty and trust were essential for our relationship to thrive. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I realized how far we had come. I felt grateful for the journey we had taken together. I knew that it hadn't been easy, but the effort we had put in was worth it. I leaned over and took Jason's hand, feeling a sense of warmth and connection. I told him that I loved him and appreciated everything we had worked through together. He smiled and squeezed my hand, and I felt a rush of happiness. In that moment, I realized that relationships require ongoing effort and understanding. I was determined to continue nurturing my marriage and my relationship with my father. I knew that as long as we communicated openly, we could overcome any obstacle together. With that thought in mind, I closed my eyes and felt a wave of peace wash over me. I was ready to embrace the future, knowing that I had the strength to face whatever came next. Together, we would continue to build a loving and supportive family. As the weeks passed, I felt a renewed sense of hope in my life. I had taken the steps necessary to confront my fears and establish boundaries. I felt stronger and more confident in my relationships with both Jason and my father. I decided to focus on rediscovering myself. I had spent so much time worrying about my relationships that I had lost sight of my own passions and interests. I wanted to reconnect with the things that brought me joy. One Saturday morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. I decided to take a painting class at a local community center. I had always loved to paint, but I hadn't picked up a brush in years. I felt excited about the idea of expressing myself creatively again. When I arrived at the class, I felt a rush of nervousness. I walked into the room and saw a group of people gathered around easels, chatting and laughing. I took a deep breath and joined them, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. The instructor welcomed us and explained the basics of painting. As I picked up the brush and started to mix colors, I felt a wave of joy wash over me. The act of creating felt liberating. I lost myself in the process, forgetting my worries. Over the next few weeks, I continued to attend the painting class. I found solace in the strokes of the brush and the colors on the canvas. I began to explore my creativity, and it felt empowering. I started to share my artwork with Jason and my father, and they encouraged me. Seeing their support made me feel valued. I realized that pursuing my passions was not only important for me but also strengthened my relationships. I was no longer just defined by my roles as a wife or daughter. I was also Clara, the artist. One evening, as I sat in the living room painting, Jason walked in and watched me for a moment. He smiled and told me how proud he was of me for taking this step. I felt a wave of warmth at his words. I wanted to continue nurturing our connection. I invited him to join me in my creative process. I set up a small canvas for him and encouraged him to paint alongside me. At first, he hesitated, but I could see his curiosity growing. It was a step towards sharing our experiences more openly. As we painted together, laughter filled the room. We talked about our dreams and aspirations while letting our creativity flow. I felt a deeper connection forming between us. It was a reminder that we could enjoy each other's company in new ways. I also made an effort to reconnect with my friends. I reached out to Mia and invited her over for a girls' night. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and reminiscing about old times. I felt rejuvenated by the connection. Mia encouraged me to continue exploring my art and even suggested that I showcase my work at a local art fair. I felt a mix of excitement and fear at the thought. The idea of putting myself out there was daunting, but I knew it could be a valuable experience. After some reflection, I decided to take the leap. I began preparing for the art fair, creating pieces that represented my journey. Each brushstroke became a part of my story, a story of overcoming doubt and finding my voice. The night of the art fair arrived, and I felt a whirlwind of emotions. As I set up my booth, I felt nervous but also proud of what I had accomplished. I had turned my struggles into art, and I wanted to share that with others. The fair was buzzing with energy. I watched as people walked by, admiring the artwork. When someone stopped to ask about my pieces, I felt a surge of confidence. I shared my story and how each piece represented my journey to self-discovery. To my surprise, people connected with my work. I sold a few pieces that night, but more importantly, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I realized that sharing my art was a way to express my emotions and connect with others. After the fair, I returned home feeling elated. Jason greeted me with a warm hug, and I could see the pride in his eyes. I shared the experience with him, and he listened intently. I felt grateful to have his support. As I reflected on my journey, I understood that self-love was essential. I had learned to prioritize my needs and passions while still nurturing my relationships. I realized that it was possible to maintain a balance between love for others and love for myself. Over time, I continued to paint and explore new creative avenues. I found joy in the process and embraced the strength that came from pursuing my passions. My relationships with Jason and my father deepened as they both supported my artistic journey. I also learned that it was okay to set boundaries and communicate my feelings. I felt empowered by the changes I had made. I was no longer afraid to speak my truth, and I knew it was vital for my happiness. As I moved forward, I felt a sense of freedom. I was excited about the future and the possibilities that lay ahead. I knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but I felt equipped to face them. With each brushstroke and every moment of connection, I was reminded of the importance of self-love and the strength found in overcoming adversity. I had grown, and I was proud of the person I was becoming. As I closed my eyes that night, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the love and support of those around me. I was Clara, the artist, the wife, and the daughter, and I was finally whole.